The wagon stopped outside Eliza Dunlow's gate with enough dry wood to keep a house alive through the first hard freeze, and the man holding the reins was 20 years too late. Cold rain silvered the cedar pine stacked behind Amos Stafford. Water ran from the brim of his hat and darkened the shoulders of his coat. But he did not call out as though he owned the road, the load, or her attention. He waited beyond the gate. Eliza stood beneath the narrow overhang of her woodshed with a splitting axe in one hand. 2 armloads remained under the roof. 3, if she burned the crooked pieces she had saved for shingle pegs. The October cold had reached Plumas County early, and the mountains above Millstone already carried a pale line of snow. A wagon of seasoned wood should have been welcome. Instead, Eliza recognized the top cedar split before Amos spoke. A narrow lightning scar crossed its bark. 3 shallow notches cut the end grain at a downward slant. Her mark, her wood. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Amos's gaze moved from her face to the load. "Lower Mine Road." "That is not what I asked." Voller's driver had it. Eliza stepped into the rain but did not open the gate. The horses shifted under their harness. Brass fittings stamped with the Windfall brand showed dark beneath the wet leather. Amos had hauled freight for Rufus Voller before. Half of Millstone knew it. "And Voller's driver gave you a wagon?" "He saw the Windfall harness lead and thought I had been sent to take over the run." "Were you?" "No." Rain ticked against the axe head. "Then you let him believe a lie, until the wagon turned." Amos's voice stayed level. "When I saw your mark, I told him the load was going back to its owner," he objected. "I asked whether he wanted to explain the wood to you or to Voller. He chose Voller. That was not your choice to make." "No." The answer came without defense. "That is why I stopped here." Eliza looked past him at the stacked fuel. Cedar from her north row, pine cut to household length. Several pieces she did not recognize from a distance. Mixed loads hid theft better than one clean stack. She set the axe against the gatepost and opened the latch. "Bring the team in no farther than the shed." Amos clicked once to the horses. The wagon rolled through, slow enough that the iron rims did not strike the gate. He stopped where she pointed, set the brake, and climbed down on the far side. He did not come around the wagon. Eliza lifted the lightning-scarred billet from the top row. Its weight told her it had seasoned through one winter and most of another. The grain twisted beneath the scar. 4 years earlier, Ephraim had struck it off a wind-felled cedar with one bad glance of the maul, bruising the bark near the base. She had laughed at the crooked split and cut it shorter for the kitchen stove. Ephraim had been dead 3 years. The wood remembered his hands. "This came from my holding," she said. "I thought it did. You thought." The mark was enough to turn the wagon, not enough to tell me the rest. Eliza traced the 3 notches with her thumb. One for the winter the tree fell, one for the drying row, one to separate stove wood from shingle stock. Amos had no reason to know that. No one did, except Ephraim, Hester Lane, and 2 cutters who had worked for her father years ago. She carried the billet to the house and set it beside the door, apart from the load. "You brought firewood to your lonely neighbor," she said, returning to the gate. "You're 20 years too late." Amos did not look away. "I know." Nothing in his face asked her to soften the words. That made them hurt more. Hoofbeats sounded on the road before Eliza could answer. Rufus Voller came through the rain in a light buggy. Broad beneath a dark oilskin coat, he pulled up outside the gate and stared at the wagon in her yard. Stafford. Amos remained beside the rear wheel. "Voller, that load belongs to my yard." Eliza stepped between the buggy and the gate. Some of it belongs to me." Voller's attention settled on her with the patience men used when they wished a woman to feel unreasonable. "Mrs. Dunlow, I purchased a mixed household lot from an independent cutter. Name him. Business records are not public property. My wood is." Voller glanced toward the cedar billet beside her door. "You have been alone on that holding a long time. Marks fade. Memory does too." Eliza felt Amos move behind her, then stop. He did not speak. "Good. The mark has not faded," she said. "Neither has the lightning scar. Neither has the place. Ephraim's maul struck the bark." Voller's mouth tightened at the dead man's name. "A split of cedar is not a deed." "No, it is a question. Who sold it to you?" "A cutter who owed freight charges. From my land, he claimed the wood." "Did you ask where he cut it?" "I ask whether a man can fill an order." "Then you bought what you did not care to identify." Voller leaned one gloved hand on the buggy rail. "Return the wagon, Stafford. I will settle this through the yard." Amos looked to Eliza, not Voller. "What do you want done?" The rain strengthened, drumming on the feed box near her door. Eliza lifted the box, turned it upside down over the lightning-scarred billet, and shielded the cedar from the weather. "The load stays until I sort every piece." Voller gave a short laugh. "You do not have authority to seize freight. Then bring me the seller. And if I refuse—" Eliza looked at the mud beneath the wagon. Fresh wheel ruts ran through her gate and back toward the road. Before that, the same tread had come from the south, carrying dark clay not found near Voller's public yard. Lower Mine Road clay. Amos had seen it too. His eyes followed the tracks without pointing them out. "Then I follow where the wagon came from," she said. Voller's expression changed by less than a breath. "Enough." He gathered the reins. "Cold makes foolish allies, Mrs. Dunlow. So does profit." The buggy turned toward Millstone. Eliza waited until its wheels vanished through the rain. Then she took up the axe, not as a weapon, but because she would not leave it in the mud. "How long before the ruts wash out?" she asked. Amos studied the road. "An hour, less if the rain holds." "Leave the wagon." "All right. Bring no one." "All right." They followed the tracks on foot beyond her gate. At the first fork, the ruts did not turn toward Voller's public freight yard. They bent downhill beneath the pines toward the Lower Mine Road, where household wood had no honest reason to be. By the time the rain erased the wagon ruts, Eliza had learned enough to know the load had not wandered by mistake. The tracks led down the Lower Mine Road, crossed a churned patch near Voller's storage sheds, then disappeared beneath the heavier marks of freight wagons bound for Millstone. No single trail proved theft. The direction proved intention. Household wood had been moved toward mine freight. Eliza returned home after dark with wet skirts, mud to her knees, and Amos walking half a pace behind her. He did not offer an arm on the slope. He did not ask to come inside. At the gate, she said, "Tomorrow, after first light." Amos nodded. "I'll be here. Do not bring men." "I won't." The next morning, October rain had thinned to a white mist over the pines. The lightning-scarred billet remained beneath the overturned feed box beside Eliza's door, dry and unburned. Amos arrived alone, leading his horse rather than riding it into the yard. Eliza had already placed 4 lengths of chalk on the wagon bed and cleared space beneath the woodshed roof. "Bring the wagon closer," she said, "no farther than the shed posts." He opened the gate only after she lifted the latch. Once the brake was set, Eliza climbed onto the rear wheel and began removing wood piece by piece. Amos stayed below and took only what she handed him. Cedar first, pine second. Each split was weighed in her palm, turned toward the morning light, and examined at the cut end. "The first notch tells me the winter the tree came down," she said when Amos glanced at a marked piece. "The second tells me which drying row held it. The third separates stove length from stock meant for shingles. You mark every piece, every sail piece. Not kindling. How many people know the system? Enough to testify, not enough to make Voller comfortable." She set a cedar round against the west wall. "This one is mine, north row." Another piece went beside it. Hester Lane's. She cuts her pine 2 inches longer because her stove box is deep. A third carried a broad black knot near the bark. Mrs. Bell's. Amos turned the split in his hands. "You remember one knot? I remember a tree that leaned over her springhouse for 11 years. When it fell, the trunk broke at that knot." He placed it where she indicated. Eliza continued. One household after another emerged from the mixed load, not through names carved in wood, but through habits. A wedge mark, a crooked saw line, bark left on one edge, lengths cut for a narrow stove. Voller had not bought one seller's lot. He had gathered pieces from several stacks and mixed them together. "Why mix them?" Amos asked. "So one person's claim looks uncertain." She reached for a cedar split at the same time he lifted it. Their fingers met over the rough grain. His hand was warm despite the mist. The contact lasted no longer than a breath. Amos released the wood at once and stepped back enough to return the choice of distance to her. Eliza took the split and found 3 old notches beneath a smear of mud. "Mine," she said. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Amos looked toward the sorted rows instead of at her hand. "How much of the wagon belongs here?" "Less than half. And the rest? We start returning it." Mrs. Bell lived less than a mile down the north road in a cabin with a low stone chimney and a porch that leaned toward the creek. Smoke pushed from the chimney in dark, uneven bursts. Before Eliza reached the steps, she smelled wet soot and sour sap. Mrs. Bell opened the door with a shawl over her grey hair and irritation in every line of her face. "If you have come to sell me more wood, I will burn the stove first." "Who delivered the last load?" Eliza asked. "Voller's man. Yesterday. Show me." Inside, the room held more smoke than heat. 2 green fir rounds lay across a weak bed of coals. Sap bubbled from one cut end and hissed into the ash. Eliza opened the stove door, then checked the pipe joint with the back of her fingers. The draft was poor, but not blocked. The wet fuel had cooled the fire until the chimney could no longer pull. "Open the rear window," she told Amos. He crossed the room without comment and raised the swollen sash with the edge of his knife. Cold air moved through the cabin. Mrs. Bell coughed into her sleeve. Voller's driver said the wood was seasoned. It was cut this year. Eliza dragged the green rounds onto the hearth with iron tongs. She split a dry cedar piece from the recovered wagon into narrow kindling, built a small hot flame, then laid 2 seasoned pine splits above it. The fire caught cleanly. Smoke thinned. The stove gave its first metal tick as heat spread through the iron. Mrs. Bell held her hands toward it. "I paid for a full cord." "You paid for dry wood." The driver wrote it in Voller's book. "Then keep the green pieces separate. Do not let anyone carry them away." Mrs. Bell looked at Amos. "Did you find this?" "Mrs. Dunlow did," he said. "I found the wagon. The distinction was small. Eliza heard it anyway." Outside, Amos unloaded the black knot pine and stacked it beneath Mrs. Bell's eave. He did not add extra wood from his own ranch. He did not offer to settle the account. He followed Eliza's count. 6 pieces returned. 4 dry splits left for immediate heat. The green delivery remained as proof. They were tying the wagon canvas when hoofbeats sounded from the road. Hester Lane came around the bend on her grey mule. riding bareback with one cedar billet laid across her lap. She dismounted stiffly and carried it to Eliza, found this behind Voller's lower sheds before dawn. The billet bore 3 shallow notches near the end, but the spacing was wider than Eliza's. Hester's mark. "Where was the rest of your stack?" Eliza asked. "Gone. Did you sell it?" "Not a stick." Hester looked at the sorted wagon, then at the smoke lifting more cleanly from Mrs. Bell's chimney. "They took my seasoned north pile and left 2 cords of green lodgepole by the charcoal pit." Amos examined the cut end without touching it, same length as the pine from yesterday's wagon. "Because it came from the same stack," Hester said. "I cut those lengths for 3 households before snow." Mrs. Bell stepped onto the porch, shawl clutched under her chin. "Then this is not a mistake." Eliza looked at the green fir rounds on the hearth, the recovered black knot pine beneath the eave, and Hester's marked cedar. A single stolen load could be denied. A pattern demanded an answer. "No," she said, "it is not." Hester lowered her voice. "Voller has more marked wood behind the freight fence." "You saw it, enough to know mine is there, maybe yours too." Amos turned toward Millstone. Eliza gathered the chalk pieces from the wagon seat and placed them in her coat pocket. "Then tomorrow we stop asking what happened to the wood." She looked down the road toward Voller's yard. "We ask him why he locked it away." The next morning, Eliza stood outside Rufus Voller's freight yard with Hester on one side and Amos on the other, looking through a fence built high enough to turn ownership into rumor. October 29 had dawned clear and hard after 2 days of rain. Water still shone in the wagon ruts, but the sky above Millstone had gone pale blue, and the first white line on the distant ridge looked sharper than before. Inside the yard, men rolled barrels beneath a shed roof while 2 mule teams waited in harness. Beyond them, under a rough canvas, Eliza could see split wood stacked in uneven rows. One cedar end bore 3 shallow cuts. Another showed the wide spacing of Hester's mark. "Open the gate," Eliza called. Rufus Voller came out of the freight office fastening one cuff. He wore no oilskin today. His coat was dark wool, brushed clean as though order itself belonged to him. "The yard is working." "So am I." Eliza pointed through the fence. "That cedar came from my holding. Hester's pine is beside it. We want to inspect the load. You want to interrupt contracted freight. Name the man who sold it." Voller stepped down from the office porch. "I told you yesterday, an independent cutter. A man with no name is not a seller. He is not obliged to stand in the road and satisfy every widow who recognizes a knot." Hester moved closer to the gate. "That pine is mine. You cut pine all over this county. Not with my wedge mark." Voller's eyes shifted toward Amos. "And you brought them here." "They chose the road," Amos said. "You still have a contract with my yard for mine hauling, which begins before winter closes the upper grade." Eliza heard the warning beneath the plain words. Windfall Ranch needed freight income. Amos had never pretended otherwise. Voller turned back to her. "Mrs. Dunlow, if you have a claim, bring an account, a witness, and a seller willing to answer for it. Until then, the wood stays where it is. The marks are the account. Marks can be cut after the fact. Then let us inspect them." "No." The answer came too fast. Eliza looked past him toward the loading platform. A broad-shouldered man with a graying beard had stopped beside a stack of flour sacks. He had been watching the exchange without joining it. A ring of yard keys hung from his belt. Voller followed Eliza's attention. "Silas," he called. The man came forward. "This is Silas Redd, my foreman." He supervised the unloading. Eliza rested one hand on the top rail of the fence. Did you see who brought that wood? Silas glanced at Voller, then at the covered rows. I saw the wagons come in. From where? Lower Road. Who owned the loads? His jaw worked once. I was told the yard had bought them. Were you shown a bill of sale? Voller cut in. Silas does not examine my books. Then he cannot tell us the purchase was lawful. He can tell you the load was received in the ordinary way. Eliza kept her attention on the foreman. Can you? Silas rubbed his thumb along the key ring. I can tell you I supervised the unloading. Voller's face hardened. And the source? I did not see money change hands. A teamster near the barrels lowered his head, pretending to check a trace. No one else spoke. The partial answer made the larger question worse. Voller had men to move the wood, books to record it, and no one willing to name the seller. Eliza stepped toward the loading platform where the fence ended against the office. The board stood 2 feet above the yard mud. Amos moved first, not to lift her, but to offer his hand. He held it open between them. Eliza considered the distance, then placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, without closing too hard. He steadied her as she stepped onto the platform, and released her once both boots were level. No lingering pressure, no claim hidden inside assistance. From the higher boards, she saw beneath the canvas edge. Mixed cedar and pine, household lengths. 3 different cutting habits in the first row alone. There are at least 4 household stacks under that cover, she said. Voller climbed 1 step, but stopped below her. You cannot identify ownership from this distance. Then open the gate. No, because I am wrong? Because this is my yard. Amos looked toward the mine wagons waiting beneath the far shed. Not all of it is yours. Voller turned on him. Mind your contract. I am. Amos stepped down from the platform into the road. Windfall will not haul that wood to the mine. Hester's head turned. Eliza stayed where she was, watching Voller. You accepted an advance, he said. I will return it. The money is already in feed and wages. Then I will return it from the ranch account. You cannot afford that before winter. Amos's voice did not rise. I can afford it better than hauling stolen household fuel. Voller gave a hard laugh. You believe her because she points at wood and names dead trees. I believe the marks. I believe the wagon route. I believe your foreman will not name a seller. Silas looked away. Voller stepped into the road. You give up my mine freight, Stafford, and your place goes to another ranch. When snow closes the North Pass, do not come asking for winter work. I won't. The words carried no performance that made the cost visible. Windfall was not rich land hidden behind a quiet man. Eliza knew the ranch sat on thin pasture and a reliable spring, enough for cattle if the winter did not run long. Mine hauling paid for oats, repairs, and hired hands when snow reduced grazing. Amos had just surrendered more than pride. Eliza climbed down from the platform without reaching for him. Do not use my name to excuse this, she said. I am not. You followed the wagon because of my mark. Yes, you are ending a contract because of your own judgment. Yes, keep the difference clear. I will. Voller looked between them. A fine arrangement. The widow names the enemy and the rancher pays. Eliza turned on him. No, I name my wood. What Amos pays is his concern. Then she faced Amos. If Windfall is no longer hauling for Voller, are your teams free? 2 teams. 4 hands, if they agree. At the ordinary local rate, yes, for 3 working days. Amos waited. Doing what? Cutting deadfall, returning identified wood, and moving household fuel. I direct the loads. I choose the roads. Your men ask me before they move a stick. Agreed. If I say stop, they stop. Agreed. No payment refused because you think the work settles something older. His expression changed by the smallest degree. Agreed. Hester folded her arms. You hire fast. Winter does not wait for certainty, Eliza said. Neither does Voller. Rufus had gone still. Then he turned toward the office. Silas, bring me the notice board. The foreman did not move at once. Voller looked back. Now. Silas entered the office and returned with a pine board darkened by old nail holes. Voller took a sheet from his ledger desk, wrote in thick strokes, and fastened it to the board beside the gate. Any cutter who works for Eliza Dunlow will receive no freight employment through this yard for the remainder of winter. Men inside the fence began reading before the last nail was driven. One young teamster removed his hat and rubbed the back of his neck. Another stared at the woodpile rather than at Eliza. Voller set the hammer down. You wanted the matter public. No, Eliza said. I wanted the wood returned. Now every man in Millstone can choose. Eliza read the notice again. Voller believed hunger would make the choice for them. Perhaps it would. That did not change the work waiting in cold cabins. She stepped into the road beside Hester and Amos. We begin at first light, she said. Where? Amos asked. My upper cut. A pine came down in the spring wind. It has stood dead, long enough to burn if the heart is sound. And if no cutters come? Eliza looked back at Voller's notice, then through the fence at the marked wood he had locked away. Then we cut it ourselves. Behind them, Silas read, still held the ring of keys. He did not look at Voller. He looked at the 3-notch cedar beneath the canvas, as though he already knew the gate would not stay closed forever. At first light, only 4 people stood Eliza's upper cut. Hester Lane, 2 brothers from the North Road, and Amos Stafford, with 1 windfall team, waiting below the slope. The blacklist had done its work before the sun cleared the ridge. 2 other cutters had sent word through a stable boy that they could not risk losing freight employment. Eliza did not blame them. Winter made cowards of no one. It only revealed which hunger each person feared most. The fallen pine lay where she had left it in spring, roots torn from the earth and trunk angled between 2 granite shelves. Dead needles clung to the upper branches. Snow had not yet reached the lower ground, but the air held that dry metallic cold that warned it would. One of the brothers, Eli Marsh, set his saw against the trunk near the root ball. Here, he asked Amos. Amos looked toward Eliza. Ask Mrs. Dunlow, Eli thought. She knows the tree. Eliza stepped over the exposed roots. Not there. The heartwood is split under the bark, cut 2 feet uphill from the first twist. She drove the tip of her axe into a narrow seam and peeled back a strip of bark. Beneath it, pale rot ran down one side, while the center remained sound. We take the clean heart for stove wood. The soft edge becomes kindling. Nothing from this section goes to shingles. Eli moved the saw where she pointed. His younger brother, Noah, took the opposite handle. Their first pull dragged. Eliza stopped them before the blade bound. Raise the far end. Let the trunk settle against the stone before you cut deeper. Hester wedged a short pine block beneath the lower side. The blade moved cleanly after that. Amos's men began limbing the upper trunk. One asked him which branches to trim close and which to leave for leverage. Amos answered, Mrs. Dunlow. Eliza pointed with her axe. Leave the west limbs until the trunk is sectioned. They keep it from rolling. The work found its rhythm. Saw teeth whispered, axes struck, and split wood landed in the thin grass with dull, solid sounds. Eliza moved between each task, reading the tree before the men could turn strength into waste. When a round showed black stain at the center, she marked it for kindling. When the grain ran clean, She set it aside for household splits. Hester cut her longer lengths for deep stove boxes. By mid-morning, they had enough seasoned heartwood for 2 partial loads. Eli Marsh lifted a heavy round toward the wagon. This one will ride high. It will ride nowhere until the load is balanced, Eliza said. The wagon stood on uneven ground, left wheel lower by nearly 4 inches. The near horse already carried more strain through the trace. Eliza had the first layer removed, placed the denser cedar pieces over the uphill wheel, and shifted pine toward the center. Amos watched without interrupting. "That much difference matters?" Noah asked. "It matters to the wheel, the horse, and the man walking beside both when the road turns to ice." She set the last round flat instead of upright. Now it rides. The first load went to Mrs. Bell. The second was divided between Ruth Carlin and an older couple near the creek who had burned half their winter reserve during an illness in September. Eliza kept the deliveries small enough that no one household was saved at the expense of another. Payment was recorded in a narrow notebook she carried inside her coat. Mrs. Bell offered cash for the returned wood. Eliza refused twice before making the reason plain. "You already paid Voller for dry fuel. I will not charge you again for what should have arrived the first time." "Then what do I owe you?" "Nothing for this. If we bring extra later, we settle it then." Amos heard the exchange from the wagon, but said nothing. On the return road, Hester walked beside Eliza while the team climbed slowly. "Silas Red argued with Voller yesterday," she said. "My sister's boy heard them from the feed shed." Eliza kept her eyes on the road. "About what?" "Green wood." Silas said the lower ridge cut was too wet for household delivery. Voller told him households would burn what they were given once the cold came. Goom. Amos's hand tightened on the reins, though his voice remained even. Did the boy hear who ordered the seasoned stacks moved? No, only that Silas did not want his name on the household loads. Eliza looked back at the wagon bed, now empty except for wood dust and one broken length of twine. A foreman who objected was not yet a witness, but he was no longer only Voller's mouth. By the second working day, October 31, the sky had closed again. Cold rain began before noon and turned to wet snow by late afternoon. Eliza sent the Marsh brothers home after the road above the creek grew slick. Amos's men covered the remaining split wood, while Hester tied the lower corners of the canvas with double half hitches. The newly prepared shingle stock stood beneath a separate lean to near Eliza's shed. It could survive damp air, but not a night under pooling snow. "We should bring the top bundles inside," Amos said. "Not yet," Eliza answered. "The fresh splits need air. Raise the pitch instead." He accepted the correction and helped set a taller support pole beneath the canvas. By dusk, the yard held 3 ordered stacks: stove wood, kindling, and shingle stock. The lightning-scarred billet remained beneath the overturned feed box beside Eliza's door, untouched. Hester left before the snow thickened. Amos sent his men toward Windfall with the empty team, while he stayed to help Eliza check the covers one last time. They had reached the gate when a canvas edge snapped loose behind them. Eliza turned. The cover over the newest stove wood sagged, one corner dragging in the mud. Then the shingle cover dropped with it. "Those knots were sound," she said. She crossed the yard at a run. The first rope lay severed beside the stack. Knot slipped, cut. Amos found the second end near the shed wall. The fibers were clean and angled, sliced with a knife. Snow gathered on the uncovered wood. "Take the stove stack," Eliza said. "I will secure the shingles." Amos moved where she directed. He did not waste time asking who had done it. Eliza dragged the heavy canvas toward the lean-to, boots sliding in the mud. The slope beside the shed gave beneath her right foot. Amos caught himself before reaching for her. "May I?" he asked. Eliza's balance shifted again. "My elbow." His hand closed around her arm just above the joint, firm enough to steady her and nowhere else. She regained her footing. Amos released at once. No lingering grip. No attempt to turn danger into closeness. They worked in silence until every stack was covered and weighted with split rounds. The damage was limited. Wet wood could still dry if protected now. The shingle stock had taken only surface moisture. Eliza carried the cut rope ends into the shed and laid them on the work table. Amos set his knife beside them without touching the fibers. "Someone wanted delay," he said, "not destruction. Delay is enough if the freeze comes." Hoofbeats sounded at the gate. Hester rode in, beneath a blanket of wet snow, her grey mule blowing hard from the climb. "Volla is telling men your marks are new," she said before dismounting. "Says you cut them after Amos turned the wagon." Eliza picked up one rope end and looked at the clean slice. "Then he knows the marks matter. He knows more than that. Silas told one of the teamsters he will not swear to where the loads came from. Volla told him he had better remember who signs his wages." Amos looked toward Millstone through the falling snow. "Silas is afraid." "He has reason," Hester said. "So do the men who stayed away today." Eliza set the rope down. "Fear is not proof." "No, but I may know where proof is." Hester pulled off one glove and warmed her fingers beneath her arm. "Your father kept winter tallies in the old Kittredge Bible, cutting marks, household lengths, which rows were stove stock. After Lemuel died, the Bible went into the cedar chest with the rest of his things." Eliza's hand stilled above the table. "Where is the chest?" "My sister had it after the sale. I brought the Bible home last summer when the binding came loose." "You have it?" "I do." Hester's face had lost its usual hardness. "Eliza, there may be more in that Bible than wood tallies." Snow struck the shed roof in soft, wet bursts. Amos remained by the doorway, far enough back that privacy still belonged to her. Eliza looked at the cut ropes, the covered stacks, and the road Volla had used to make truth expensive. "Bring it tomorrow," she said. Hester did not move. "Are you certain?" Eliza thought of her father's careful handwriting, his locked drawers, and the certainty with which he had once told her Amos Stafford was dead. "No," she said. "Bring it anyway." Hester brought the Bible the next afternoon, wrapped in oilcloth and held against her ribs, as though the weather might still reach through it. The wet snow had stopped before dawn, leaving the yard patched white beneath the pines and brown wherever boots or wagon wheels had cut through. Eliza had spent the morning checking the covered stacks, turning the outer stove pieces so the damp sides faced air, and setting the severed rope ends on the shingle shed table beside her knife. The lightning-scarred cedar billet remained beneath the overturned feed box near the house, dry, unburned, waiting for a purpose she had not yet named. Hester entered the shed without being asked to the kitchen. "My sister kept the cedar chest after your father's sale," she said. "The Bible stayed in it until last summer. The binding had begun to pull loose, so I brought it home before the damp took the pages." She laid the oilcloth between the cut ropes. Eliza unwrapped it slowly. The leather was dark brown, rubbed pale at the corners. A shallow burn scar marked the spine where her mother had once set it too close to a lamp when Eliza was 14. That small damage struck harder than the size of the book. Her mother had laughed while Lemuel scolded over the scorched leather. Amos had still lived near Millstone then. Ephraim had been a boy she knew only from church suppers. Every life that later narrowed her choices had once been ordinary and unwritten. "I thought this was buried with him," Eliza said. "The smaller one was. Your father kept two after your mother died." Hester pulled off her gloves. "I never opened this beyond checking for mildew. You said there were winter tallies. There are notes beside scripture." Lemuel wrote wherever he found space. Eliza opened the cover. The paper smelled of dust, old leather, and cedar from the chest. Her father's handwriting appeared in narrow strokes along the margins. Names of households, bushels of apples traded, lamp oil owed, a roof repaired in exchange for 2 cords of pine. Lemuel had distrusted loose papers because they could be lost, burned, or read by men he did not trust. He had put accounts beside Psalms and debts beside Isaiah, as though the Lord might keep better watch over both. Eliza turned pages with the tips of her fingers. Near the book of Numbers, a faded line recorded stove lengths for her mother's room. Farther on, beneath a passage about winter rain, she found her own married name. 3 cuts on Dunlow cedar, keep separate for stove orders. The ink had faded brown. The writing was at least 7 years old. Hester leaned close enough to read. "There. It proves my father knew the system and used it before Voller leased the lower yard. His handwriting can still be disputed. Anything can be disputed by a man paid to dispute it." Eliza touched the notation. It did not prove every marked billet behind Voller's fence belonged to her. It proved the marks had not appeared after Amos turned the wagon. Useful. Not enough. "The old shingles may carry the same cuts," she said. "The bundles beneath the rear lean-to. Some have been there since Ephraim was alive. I will open them when the weather clears." Hester nodded, but her attention had shifted lower on the page. A white edge showed near the binding. Not paper from the Bible. An envelope. Eliza eased it free. The yellowed paper had been pressed flat between Isaiah and Jeremiah. No notation marked the place. Her name crossed the front in black ink. Miss Eliza Kittredge. The letters leaned forward with a force she remembered before she admitted remembering it. Amos had written her name that way on a scrap wrapped around a sprig of rabbit brush when she was 23. On the back, dark red wax held the flap closed. The borrowed seal had left a faint 5-point star. The postmark read November 1863. Eliza did not feel the cold at first. Then her fingers began to ache around the envelope. Hester. The other woman stepped back. "I did not know it was there. You never opened it." "No. Did your sister?" "She cannot read more than prices and names. She would have told me if she found a sealed letter." Eliza held the envelope toward the window. The wax had cracked at one edge from age, but remained unbroken across the flap. No knife had entered it. No steam had loosened it. Her father had taken the letter, hidden it, and preserved its silence for 20 years. Hester's voice softened. "Is it his?" "Yes." "You are sure?" "I know his hand." Eliza laid the envelope on the work table, not because she wanted distance, but because her hands no longer trusted themselves. "No one is to hear of this. They won't from me. Not your sister, not Mrs. Bell, not Ruth. I heard you." Eliza closed the Bible over the old notation. Proof of the marks, proof of the letter. One useful, one unbearable, both placed by Lemuel's hand where his daughter would never think to look. A horse stopped outside the shed. Hester glanced toward the door. Amos dismounted beyond the gate and tied his sorrel to the fence rail. He carried no axe and brought no wagon. His coat was damp at the hem from the road. He waited until Eliza appeared in the doorway. "What happened?" she asked. Voller offered double wages to any cutter who leaves your work before tomorrow. How many took it? The Marsh brothers returned their advance to me this morning. Their mother owes Voller's store for flour and lamp oil. They said they cannot risk the account being closed. They made the choice they could afford. Yes. And your men? Still at Windfall. I told them the third working day begins tomorrow, if you still want the team. I do. Amos looked past her no farther than the work table. The envelope lay beside the Bible in full view. His body went still. Not with surprise alone, recognition. Where did you get that? Hester collected her gloves. I will leave you both. Eliza stopped her with one look. You do not have to. No, but you asked for silence. It will be easier kept if I do not hear what follows. She touched Eliza's forearm once, then passed Amos without greeting, and led her mule down the road. Amos remained outside the shed. The letter was in my father's Bible, Eliza said, sealed. His gaze fixed on her name across the envelope. I wrote it after the wreck. What wreck? A freight wagon went off the Nevada road. Broke my leg below the knee. The words came plainly, stripped of drama. A ranch family took me in, 40 miles from the nearest post stop. When a rider came through, I paid him to carry the letter east. You knew it might not arrive. I knew nothing else would. What did you seal it with? Amos looked at the wax. The rancher's daughter had a little brass stamp. A star. I borrowed it because the gum on the envelope had dried. The explanation matched the object too neatly to dismiss. Eliza hated that part of her, had searched for a flaw before he finished speaking. Did you write again? No. Why? I thought this one reached you. You received no answer. No. And that was enough? His face tightened. At the time, I believed it was. Eliza took the envelope from the table. My father told me you were dead. Amos's breath stopped, then returned slowly. I did not know that. He said a teamster saw the wagon below a ravine. He said no one survived. The wagon did go over. One mule died. News could have reached Millstone before I did. And this letter reached him. It appears so. Anger sharpened her voice. Do not sound surprised that he kept it. I am surprised. I am not defending him. You thought I chose not to answer. Yes, you thought silence was my decision. Yes, he did not say it had been reasonable. He did not blame a young woman for failing to hear words hidden in a Bible. Eliza put one thumb beneath the edge of the seal, then stopped. If she opened it, the past would no longer remain a question she could shape. It would become ink, exact words, exact promises, perhaps excuses, perhaps nothing worth 20 years. Leave, she said. Amos lowered his head once. All right? He turned toward the gate. The obedience cut more sharply than an argument would have. Amos. He stopped, but did not face her until she spoke again. Come back to the doorway. He returned to the shed and stood beneath the lintel. No, Father, I understand. Eliza's hands had begun to shake. She could have hidden them. She could have sent him away and opened the letter alone after dark. Instead, she reached across the threshold and closed her fingers around the sleeve of his damp coat. Wool beneath her palm, solid warmth beneath the wool. Amos did not cover her hand. He did not step inside. He did not ask what she needed from him. He simply remained where she had placed him. Eliza held his sleeve with one hand and lifted the old envelope with the other. The wax resisted, then gave beneath her thumb with a dry, brittle crack. The wax broke with a dry snap, and Eliza felt Amos go still beneath her hand. She unfolded the letter once, then again. The paper had yellowed along the creases, but the ink remained dark enough to read. For 20 years, the words had existed without reaching her. Now they lay open beneath the shed window in the late light of November 2. Eliza, she read aloud, because silence had already done enough. I am alive, but I will not reach Millstone before the snow. Her grip tightened on Amos's sleeve. He did not move. The next lines carried no polish. Amos wrote that the freight wagon had gone over on the Nevada road after a wheel broke on a steep grade. One mule died. The other dragged the shattered tongue clear before the teamster, with him cut the harness. Amos had been thrown against the rear wheel and carried to a ranch too far from any regular post route. His left leg had broken below the knee. The rancher set it with boards from a packing crate. By the time Amos could sit upright, the first storms had closed the higher road. I have asked every rider passing east to carry this, Eliza continued. One finally agreed. I do not know when it will reach you. She swallowed and read on. He asked her not to believe any report of his death unless it came from a man who had seen his body. He wrote that he would return when he could bear a saddle. Near the bottom, the hand grew less steady. I still mean to bring the winter wood I promised your mother, not green pine, dry cedar from the lower ridge, because her breathing worsens when the stove smokes. Eliza stopped. Her mother had been dead 19 years, yet Amos had remembered the winter cough, the way smoke caught in her lungs, and the cedar that burned hotter and cleaner than pine. That memory hurt more than any declaration could have. She forced herself to finish. Wait for me until spring. If you still wish me to come, leave one lantern in the west window on the first Sunday after the road opens. I will understand. The letter ended with no grand vow, only his name. Eliza lowered the page. Outside, meltwater fell from the roof in slow drops. There was no lantern, Amos said. I never knew to light one. I know that now. My father said a teamster saw your wagon in a ravine. He said no man lived through it. Amos remained at the threshold. The wagon did go down. That part was true. He built the lie out of something no one would question. Yes, Eliza released his sleeve and carried the letter into the house. Amos did not follow until she looked back and said, "The kitchen doorway, no farther." He stopped there. She laid the paper on the table beside the Bible and fed the stove 2 ordinary pine splits. The lightning-scarred cedar remained outside under the overturned feed box. It was not fuel, not yet. "You expected a lantern," she said. "Yes, and when there was none, I thought you had answered. By silence, yes, a silence you now know was made for me." Amos's jaw tightened. Yes. Eliza looked down at the letter. The young man who wrote it had tried. The man before her had lived 20 years with the wrong conclusion. Neither fact restored what had been taken. Meaning to return is not the same as returning. No. His answer came without defense. You do not argue much, not when you are right. That can be another way of hiding. He accepted the blow. It can. She folded the letter along its old creases and slid it back into the envelope. This stays with me. It was always yours. No one hears what it says. They won't from me. Eliza placed the envelope inside the Bible and closed the cover. Tomorrow is the 3rd working day. I remember. Ruth Carlin's cabin first. Hester says Voller's men delivered to her after dark. I will have the wagon here by sunrise. No extra wood from windfall unless I ask. Understood. Amos put on his hat. He did not ask whether she believed the letter. He did not ask whether it changed anything. At the gate, Eliza watched him lead the sorrel toward the road. The old words had answered why he had not returned before winter. They had not answered the years after spring. The next morning, November 3, smoke pressed from Ruth Carlin's chimney in black, uneven bursts. Her narrow cabin stood near the north road with 2 young nieces huddled beneath a quilt inside. Ruth opened the door with a cloth tied over her nose. "The stove won't draw," she said. I opened the damper twice. Eliza stepped into a room thick with wet soot. Amos remained outside with the wagon until she called for him. "Raise the rear window," she said. He crossed to the swollen sash and worked it upward with the edge of his knife. Cold air entered at floor level. Eliza pulled on gloves and crouched before the iron stove. 2 green fir rounds lay across a weak bed of coals. Sap bubbled from one cut end and hissed into ash. "When did Voller's men bring this?" she asked. "Last night." Ruth coughed into the cloth. "They said dry wood had gone to freight customers, and this would do if I kept the damper open." "It will not." Eliza removed the damp rounds with tongs and set them on the stone hearth. She checked the stovepipe joint, then held a dry cedar shaving near the open firebox. The pull was weak but present. The green logs had cooled the fire until the chimney could not lift the smoke. "Amos, bring 6 of Mrs. Bell's returned splits, the ones marked in chalk and the kindling sack." "6," he repeated. He brought no more. Eliza rebuilt the fire low and hot. Thin cedar caught first. Dry pine followed. The flame strengthened, and smoke began to rise cleanly through the pipe. One of the girls lowered the quilt from her face. Ruth leaned against the table. "Voller's clerk said refusing the load would close my store account." "Did you sign for green wood?" Eliza asked. "I signed a mark where he pointed." "Did anyone read the page aloud?" "No." Eliza straightened. "Then do not sign another." Hoofbeats stopped outside. Silas Red appeared at the open door, coat unbuttoned and beard wet with mist. He looked first at the green rounds, then at the smoke thinning above the stove. "Mrs. Carlin," he said, "Mr. Voller sent me to remind you that fuel delivered on account remains part of your winter balance." Ruth's face tightened. "This fuel nearly smoked my nieces from the house." Silas did not answer her. His attention moved to Eliza. "If she accepts wood taken from the yard, Mr. Voller may close the account." "This dry wood came from a load Voller had no named seller for," Eliza said. "Ruth already paid for usable fuel. I do not keep the books. No, you only supervised unloading." The words landed. Silas's gaze dropped to the hearth. "I warned him the lower ridge cut was too green." Ruth pulled the cloth from her face. "Then why did you bring it?" "I did not bring this load." "But you knew." Silas looked toward the road. "I knew what was being cut." "And what did Voller say?" Eliza asked. He hesitated. "That households would burn what they were given once the cold set in." The same words Hester had reported, spoken now by the man who heard them. Silas saw what he had revealed and stepped back. "I have said enough." "Not yet," Eliza said. "Who ordered the seasoned stacks moved?" His mouth hardened. "Ask Voller. I am asking you." "Then I have no answer you can use." He turned and left. The hoofbeats faded toward Millstone. Ruth stared after him. "Will he lose his place for saying that?" "Perhaps," Eliza said. "So might anyone who tells the truth in Voller's yard." She showed Ruth how to keep the green rounds separate and use only small pieces after a hot fire was established. Amos carried the damp wood beneath the eave but left it on Ruth's property as evidence. He asked where to stack the returned splits and followed Eliza's answer. When the girls stopped coughing, Ruth held her hands toward the warming stove. "You should take payment," she said. "Not for wood you already bought." "Then what do I owe?" "Keep the green pieces. Remember who delivered them. If anyone asks you to sign, send for someone who can read the page aloud." Outside, the air felt sharper after the smoke. Eliza's hands had gone cold inside her gloves. Amos stood beside the wagon, waiting for the next instruction. The letter rested inside her coat, close to her ribs. It proved he had remembered cedar, her mother's lungs, the west window. It did not tell her what he had done after the road opened. Eliza crossed the few feet between them and took his hand. Amos looked down once, then closed his fingers around hers. Warm, steady, he did not pull her closer. She held on. Smoke from Ruth Carlin's chimney thinned to a pale line above them. "You meant to come home," Eliza said. "Yes. That does not explain the years." "No. Then tell me what does." Amos loosened his grip just enough to leave her free to withdraw. Eliza did not. His face held no defense now, only the weight of a truth he had carried too long. "The letter is not the worst of it," he said. "What is?" He met her eyes. I did come back. Eliza's hand went cold inside his. Behind them, Ruth Carlin's chimney drew cleanly at last. A pale thread of smoke rising into the November sky. Inside the cabin, one of the girls laughed at something her sister whispered. Ordinary life had resumed. The words between Eliza and Amos had not. She released his hand. "When?" "Spring of '64. "Where?" "Millstone." The name struck harder than Nevada would have. Nevada was distance, injury, snow. Millstone was 2 miles from her door. Eliza looked toward the wagon. "Take me home." Amos opened the step but did not offer his hand. She climbed without help and sat beside him with the old letter inside her coat. The road ran wet beneath the wheels. Neither spoke while the team crossed the creek and climbed toward her holding. Amos kept the horses to a walk where frozen mud hid beneath the ruts. Eliza watched the pines pass and counted the things he had already admitted. He had written. He had survived. He had intended to return. Now he claimed he had stood in the same town where she mourned him and still let her believe him dead. At her gate, Amos set the brake outside. The lightning-scarred cedar billet remained beneath the overturned feed box beside the house. The family Bible rested inside on the kitchen table. Everything she had known that morning stood where she had left it. Only the past had moved. "Do you want me inside?" he asked. "The porch." Amos tied the team and followed her through the gate. He stopped beneath the eave. Meltwater dropped between the roof edge and the yard, making a narrow curtain. Eliza stayed on the outer side of it. "Tell me what you saw." He removed his hat. The road opened late. My leg had healed enough for a saddle, though I could not ride far without stopping. I reached Millstone on a Sunday. Church Sunday. Yes, my father took me every week. I remembered. His gaze shifted toward the road as if the old church still stood before him. I tied my horse behind the mercantile. I meant to wash, shave, find clothes that did not look slept in. You were ashamed. Yes, of what? The debt from the wreck, the limp, arriving months after I promised. So you hid behind a building, at first. The answer held no excuse. Then the church doors opened. Eliza knew the scene before he described it. The whitewashed steps, frost lingering on the north side. Ephraim waiting because Lemuel had encouraged him to walk her home. "I saw you with Ephraim," Amos said. "His arm was under yours. The steps were icy. I did not know. You could have asked." "Yes. What else?" Your father shook his hand. A teamster beside me said the match was settled. Eliza stared at him. "A man you did not know told you my life was settled." I believed him. "Why?" Amos's fingers closed around the brim of his hat. "Because he said what I feared was true, that I had chosen Ephraim, that you had chosen a man with land, no freight debt, and 2 sound legs. I was engaged." Amos's face tightened. "Not married, not until the next year." The water falling from the eave struck the porch boards with slow, hard taps. "My father told me you were dead," Eliza said. I agreed to walk with Ephraim because I believed the man I had waited for lay under a Nevada road without a grave. Amos lowered his eyes. I did not know you were across the street. Yes, close enough to call my name. Yes, close enough to knock at my father's door. Yes, and you left that afternoon. The directness of the answer cut deeper than resistance would have. Eliza stepped closer to the porch. Why, pride, he said it without delay. And shame. I had imagined coming back as the man who kept his word. Instead, I was late, poor, and afraid you would look at me and wish I had stayed dead. So you chose my answer for me. Yes, do not agree because it is easier than hearing me. Amos raised his head. Nothing about hearing you is easy. Good. Her voice shook once. She forced it steady. My father stole the letter. He stole the truth before I could choose. But he did not make you stand across the road. No. He did not make you leave Millstone. No, he took one choice from me. Eliza stepped beneath the eave. You gave away another. Amos accepted the words as though they belonged where they struck. I did. Those are different wrongs, I know. Do you? Anger rose through grief, clean enough to keep her upright. My father decided he knew what life suited me. You decided your fear was proof enough to disappear. Neither of you asked what I wanted. Amos's jaw tightened. You are right. I married Ephraim. I know. He was a decent man. I never thought otherwise. Do not turn him into a mistake so you can make yourself the answer. I won't. He lived 15 years beside a grief he did not create. Amos closed his eyes once. I am sorry. Sorry does not return those years. No. Eliza struck both palms against his chest. The blow moved him half a step. Her hands stayed there, gripping the wet wool of his coat. She had meant to push him away. Instead, the strength left her arms. Amos did not pull her in. He waited until she leaned against him, then brought one arm around her shoulders and the other across her back. Eliza held him. Not the young man from the letter, not the dead man she had mourned, the living man who had crossed mountains, reached Millstone, and failed at the final 20 yards. His heart beat beneath her cheek, solid, unforgivable. Dear, she mourned the woman who never saw him across the road. She mourned Ephraim, whose goodness deserved more than being placed between two unfinished people. She mourned Amos too, though she hated that he had made himself part of the loss. When Eliza stepped back, he released her before she had to ask. His hands fell to his sides. The 3 working days are finished, she said. Amos nodded. You are ending the hire. Yes, all right, I will pay the ordinary rate. I will take it. No refusal meant to make the work a gift. No attempt to tie them through gratitude. Your men can complete the last delivery already loaded, she said. They take orders from me. You do not come with them. Understood. Leave the wagon until they collect it. I will. Amos put on his hat. He walked through the gate without turning the departure into a plea. Eliza could have called him back. The wish rose so sharply that she pressed one hand over the letter inside her coat. She stayed silent. Amos mounted and rode toward Windfall Ranch at a measured pace, leaving hoofprints dark in the wet road. Eliza carried the letter inside, returned it to the family Bible, and placed the book on the high shelf above the table. By dawn on November 5, the wet snow had frozen into a thin crust. Eliza was splitting kindling when the gate latch struck the post. Hester Lane came up the road on foot. Her breath showed hard in the cold. One glove was missing, and a severed harness strap hung from her fist. Eliza set down the axe. Where is your team? Hester stopped beside the woodpile, Voller's yard. Why? 2 men came before sunrise, took the grey, the bay, and the harness. Said my winter account gave Voller a hold until I paid. Did you sign the team as security? No. Hester held out the strap. The leather had been cut cleanly from the wagon tongue. His clerk says the charge book reads otherwise. What balance, flour, lamp oil, and a wheel repair from Spring. I paid half after the charcoal sale. Do you have the receipt? At home. Hester's anger gave way to exhaustion for one breath. They knew I could not follow without the team. Eliza looked toward Millstone. Voller had answered their woodcutting with hunger. Now he had answered evidence with a claim written in his own book. Can you walk back? Eliza asked. I walked here. That was not my question. Hester's shoulders lowered. Not without resting. Eliza opened the gate wider. Then come inside. And after, Eliza picked up the severed strap and felt the clean knife edge beneath her thumb. The last contracted windfall delivery would move without Amos. Her old shingle sled still rested beneath the rear lean-to. Marked wood waited behind Voller's fence, and now Hester's livelihood stood there too. After, Eliza said, we stop asking Voller to return what he takes. She met Hester's tired gaze. We make keeping it cost him. Eliza warmed Hester before she planned how to answer Rufus Voller. The older woman sat beside the stove with dry stockings on her feet, and both hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee, while the severed harness strap lay across the kitchen table. Outside, the November 5 morning had hardened every puddle into grey ice. He wants us at the gate, Hester said. Angry loud, empty-handed. Yes, so we don't go. Not today. Hester looked toward the window. My grey and bay are half my living. And if we spend the day arguing over them, 6 households lose another day of heat. Eliza placed one finger on the clean cut through the leather. We keep working. We make his credit worth less every hour. By noon, the old shingle sled stood upside down beneath the rear lean-to. It had been built low and broad for hauling bundled shakes over frozen ground, but its side rails were too shallow for split wood. Eliza removed 2 warped boards from a drying rack, trimmed them to length, and bored fresh peg holes. Hester worked from an overturned bucket, binding the rails with rawhide when her knees would no longer let her crouch. The final contracted windfall delivery moved without Amos. 2 ranch hands arrived with the wagon, took their instructions from Eliza, unloaded where she pointed, and left without carrying messages between the 2 neighboring homes. That restraint reached her more sharply than an apology would have. Over the next 3 days, Eliza turned the shingle shed into the center of a winter system Voller could not control. A list hung beside the door. Households were ranked by cold, not by money or reputation. Payment took 4 forms and no more: coin, cutting labor, kindling work, or repayment after winter. Mrs. Bell arrived with an apron full of pine cones. Ruth Carlin split dry cedar into stove lighting sticks while her nieces tied bundles with twine. A miner recovering from a crushed foot sat beneath the shed roof and sharpened saw teeth. Hester continued on foot until her team returned, or the dispute forced another answer. Eliza did not call the work charity. Charity could be twisted into gratitude, and gratitude into obedience. Each household gave what it could. No one gave loyalty. On the afternoon of November 7, Hester pointed toward the oldest shingle bundles beneath the rear lean-to. Those have been there since Ephraim was alive. Eliza followed her gaze. The outer shingles had weathered gray, but the cords remained sound. Several bundles were warped beyond sale and had been kept for roof repairs or kindling. "Help me turn them," she said. They cut the top binding and lifted the first layer apart. The narrow ends were pale where light had never reached them. On the 3rd row, Eliza found 3 shallow notches beneath the old cord line. Same downward slant, same spacing. Another bundle carried them, then a third. Hester rubbed her thumb across the cuts. How old? 7 years at least, perhaps 8. Before Voller leased the lower yard, before he began buying mine wood. The Bible notation proved Lemuel had recorded the system. The shingles proved the mark existed in wood long before Voller accused Eliza of inventing it. She retied the bundles with new cord and moved them beneath the deepest part of the shed. These do not leave without me. They won't. Hester rose stiffly and looked down the road toward Millstone. My sister's boy brought word from the feed shed. Voller has started saying Silas Red handled every questionable load. Eliza straightened. Silas objected to the green household cut, which is why Voller needs him frightened. Did the boy hear more? Only that if any customer asks where the wood came from, Silas is to answer for it. Eliza glanced at the old marks. A frightened foreman might protect Voller. A cornered one might protect himself. Either way, pressure had begun to divide the yard. Near sunset on November 8, a boy from Millstone arrived with a folded notice tucked inside his coat. He handed it to Eliza and waited near the gate while she read. Windfall Ranch will haul household fuel before mine freight. Ordinary team rates. No household account will be charged through Voller's store. Amos's hand was unmistakable, but Eliza's name did not appear. He had not declared partnership with her work or used her cause to polish his own. Beneath the notice lay a receipt acknowledging repayment of Voller's mine-hauling advance. The amount was large enough to hurt a modest ranch through winter. Hester read it over Eliza's shoulder. He returned all of it. It was his debt and his choice. Yes, the boy shifted from one boot to the other. There's more. He produced a second folded paper. This one bore Voller's signature, Silas Red's witness mark, and the date. The alleged lane balance had been paid in full. Any claimed hold over 1 gray mule, 1 bay mule, and their harness was relinquished. The livery was instructed to release the animals only to Hester Lane. Where are they? Hester asked. At the livery. Mr. Stafford told the keeper not to hand them over to anyone but you. Did he buy the debt? He paid what Mr. Voller demanded, said the receipt decides the hold, not who owns the team. Hester read the paper twice. Her name appeared as owner. Amos's name appeared only beside the amount paid. No transfer, no hidden claim, no condition requiring labor at Windfall or gratitude at Eliza's door. Did Amos send terms? Hester asked. The boy handed her a smaller note. Hester unfolded it. Her expression tightened, then eased. He says I can repay after the charcoal sale, sooner if I choose, or dispute the amount in Quincy and let him wait. No interest? Eliza asked. None written. Then have the liveryman read the release aloud before you take the team. I can read it. Have him read it anyway. Let him hear his own duty. Hester folded the receipt and placed it inside her coat. I will repay Amos. That is yours to decide. You wish he had left it alone. Eliza looked at the Windfall notice again. Part of me does. The rest notices he did not bring the harness here and lay it at my feet. Amos had corrected a harm without using Hester's need to reopen Eliza's gate. He had returned the mine advance, risked his winter income, and kept her name off his notice. Then he had stayed away because she had sent him away. No speech, no witness demanded. By dark, Hester's Gray and Bay stood once more in their own shed. The original release remained in Hester's possession, wrapped in oilcloth beside her spring receipts. Eliza spent the evening securing the old shingle bundles and adding 6 household names to the winter list. The lightning-scarred billet still rested beneath the overturned feed box beside her door. When she passed it, the narrow black seam showed at the edge where the wood had split around the scar. It had become proof once. It might have to become proof again. The boy waited near the stove, warming his hands before riding back toward Windfall. Eliza tore a narrow strip from the bottom of her household list. For 20 years, Amos had arrived with explanations only after the road had already closed behind him. Now, he had acted where she could refuse to see it. That was different. Not enough. Different. She wrote one sentence, folded the strip once, and handed it to the boy. Put this in Amos Stafford's hand. Does he need to answer? No. The boy tucked the note inside his coat. On it, Eliza had written, "Come at sundown. Bring nothing." Amos arrived at sundown with empty hands. No axe hung from his belt. No rope crossed his shoulder. No folded paper showed from his coat, and no sack rested behind the saddle. He tied the sorrel outside Eliza's gate and waited until she opened it. "You brought nothing," she said. "You told me not to. Men often hear only the part that suits them. I heard all of it." Eliza stepped aside. "Come in." He removed his hat before crossing the threshold. The kitchen smelled of beans, onions, and bread warmed near the stove. 2 bowls waited on the table. The family Bible rested on the high shelf with the opened letter inside. Beyond the wall, beneath the overturned feed box beside the door, the lightning-scarred cedar billet remained dry and unburned. Eliza took her chair. Amos waited until she sat before lowering himself across from her. They ate without hurry. The scrape of a spoon against crockery and the low drawer of the stove filled the spaces neither tried to cover. Eliza had prepared more questions than she meant to ask. Most were only the same wound wearing different words. She chose 3. "Why didn't you knock in 64? Amos set down his spoon. "Pride kept me across the road. Only pride. Shame too. I had come back late, limping, and owing money for a wrecked wagon. Ephraim stood beside you, looking like a man who had arrived when he said he would. So you decided he suited me. I decided I could bear leaving better than hearing you choose him." "Better for whom?" "Me." The answer did not ask mercy. Eliza folded her hands on the table. "Why didn't you come after Ephraim died?" "I heard 3 months later. 3 months is not 3 years. No." Amos looked at the stove rather than away from her. "I told myself a grieving woman should not have an old mistake arrive at her door. Was that kindness? At first I called it that. And after it was habit." "Which habit?" "Work." He rubbed one thumb along the rim of his bowl, then stopped. "A fence tells a man where to stand. A broken wheel tells him what to mend. Cattle tell him when they are hungry. None of those things ask whether he is wanted when the work is finished." The words were plain, but they reached where polished apologies could not. Eliza did not rescue him from their weight. "You bought Windfall Ranch 1.5 miles from me." "Yes." "You knew the road." "Yes." "Yet you waited for stolen wood to give you a reason." Amos met her gaze. "I saw your mark on Voller's wagon. I knew the load was wrong." "That is not what I asked." "No." His shoulders settled as though he had finally stopped trying to stand straighter than the truth. "Bringing the wood back gave me an excuse to come near your gate without saying I had come for you." Eliza's fingers tightened once. "And had I taken the load, thanked you, and sent you away, I would have gone." "You say that easily." "It would not have been easy. Truth does not buy you a place at this table tomorrow. I know." "Do not say you know if you are only waiting for me to. Soften. Then I will say this instead. I came because you asked. I will leave if you ask. Neither one earns the next invitation." Eliza rose and carried their bowls to the basin. Amos stayed seated. He did not offer to wash, dry, mend the loose latch, or add wood to the stove. Every useful thing in the room seemed suddenly aware of him and disappointed by his restraint. Eliza rinsed the bowls and set them aside. "The freight yard challenge is mine," she said. "Yes, I decide who comes, which proof is shown, when the wagons move, and where returned wood goes. Yes, you do not break a gate. No, you do not speak for me because you are stronger or louder. I won't. If Voller insults me," Amos's jaw moved, "I wait for your word. If he calls me mistaken, I wait. If he points at you and says I made you ruin Windfall, I tell him my choices are mine. Nothing more, nothing unless you ask." Eliza returned to the table, but did not sit. "Can you stand beside a woman who may never need you the way you understand need?" Amos considered before answering. "I can learn. No oath, no claim that he already had. The humility in it unsettled her more than confidence would have." She rested one hand on the table between them. "Learning may cost you. It already has. That is not permission to boast of the price. I won't. I may send you away again, then I'll go. I may ask you back, then I'll come, empty-handed, if that is what you ask." Eliza turned her palm upward. Amos did not reach at once. He waited until she moved her hand closer. Then he placed his hand in hers. His palm was rough and warm, marked by rain leather and winter work. He did not close his fingers until she closed hers first. No crisis required the contact. No slick ground, no heavy load, no frightened household gave it purpose. That made it more dangerous. Eliza stepped around the corner of the table without releasing him. Amos rose. He remained where he was until she shortened the distance, close enough now for her to see the faint red line beside his mouth and the gray at his temples. He was not the young man who had written the letter. She was not the girl who had watched the west window for a lantern signal she never knew to give. Their joined hands rested between them. Eliza lifted her face. Amos bent only slightly, no farther than the space she had already offered. Their foreheads nearly touched. His breath warmed the side of her cheek. Desire moved through her with no gentleness in its arrival. It was not forgiveness. It was not proof that the lost years had been worthwhile. It was simply true. Eliza turned her mouth toward his, then stopped. The distance between them narrowed to less than an inch. Amos did not finish it. His hand remained around hers, steady and open. Eliza closed her eyes briefly, then stepped back. He released her without making the retreat a wound. "Not yet," she said. "All right." The answer came rougher than the others, which made it honest. Outside, iron-rimmed wheels struck the frozen ruts. The sound approached from the lower road without a lantern showing through the window. Amos turned his head. Eliza crossed to the door and lifted the curtain edge. A dark freight wagon moved between the pines, canvas drawn low over the bed. It slowed as it reached her property. "That is Voller's lower yard wagon," Amos said. "How do you know?" "Rear wheel leans left. Pike has not replaced the axle box." The wagon did not continue toward the upper woodlot. It stopped beyond Eliza's gate. One man held the reins. Another shadow climbed down from the far side. Eliza opened the door no wider than a hand and watched the figure move along the fence line. Snow crust cracked under his boots. He did not head toward the shingle shed or the larger stacks. He came straight toward the house, toward the overturned feed box beside her door. Amos moved once, then stopped himself. "What do you want?" he asked. The shadow reached the gate latch. Eliza looked at the dry box covering the lightning-scarred cedar billet, the one piece she had kept separate from every stove and every load. "We watch," she said. The gate opened with a soft wooden click. The man stepped into her yard and reached down for the box. The man lifted the feed box and exposed the lightning-scarred cedar billet beneath it. Snow had not reached the dry patch where the wood lay, and the 3 shallow notches showed pale against the end grain. Eliza watched through the narrow opening of her door as he bent, gripped the billet with both hands, and carried it toward Voller's wagon. Amos stood behind her, close enough to act, still enough to let the decision remain hers. "I can stop him before he reaches the gate," he said. The man crossed the yard, with the black lightning seam visible along the bark. "No, that piece proves the load came from here, which is why Voller wants it." The thief placed the billet beneath the wagon canvas. Eliza heard wood strike wood. He returned the feed box to the ground, but not over the same place. The dry rectangle remained beside it, clean against the crusted snow. Then he left through the gate. "If we take him now, he says the wood was disputed freight," Eliza said. "If you lay hands on him, Voller says a rancher attacked his men in the dark." Amos's voice stayed low. "And if we let them go, we learn where he puts what he cannot explain." The driver flicked the reins. The wagon began uphill, wheels grinding over frozen ruts. Eliza took her coat from the peg. Amos opened the door only after the wagon passed beyond the bend. They followed beneath the pines, keeping enough distance that the horses' harness noise covered their steps. At the fork, the wagon turned toward Eliza's upper woodlot. One man climbed down with a hooded lantern and opened the canvas. The lightning-scarred billet lay near the rear, its crooked split unmistakable. 3 more men waited beside the covered north stack. Warren Pike held the reins. Amos recognized the wagon before he named the driver. "Pike hauled with me last spring. Will he stop if you call him?" "Yes." "Then do not." The men rolled seasoned rounds from Eliza's stack and carried them to the wagon. Cedar first, then pine cut to household length. Hester's longer pieces were mixed among them. Voller was not merely moving disputed wood before daylight. He was gathering every marked load he could reach, and placing the stolen billet on top as though one more piece might bury the truth instead of sharpen it. Amos shifted beside Eliza. "I can get ahead of the team at the lower fork." "No, Pike won't drive over me. That is not the danger." Eliza watched a 3-notch cedar round disappear beneath the canvas. "Voller wants the quarrel to become your strength against his gate. Then no one asks why his yard holds our wood." The men tied the canvas low. Warren Pike turned the wagon toward Millstone. A soft whistle came from the trees behind Eliza. Hester emerged leading her gray mule, coat buttoned over her nightdress and boots. "I saw you pass," she whispered. "My bay would announce himself to Nevada. The gray has more sense." Eliza pointed toward the moving wagon. "Follow by the south cut. Do not let them see you. Find which enclosure takes the load and whether it moves again tonight." Hester put one foot in the stirrup. "And you?" A wet, tearing sound came from downhill toward Eliza's holding, then a heavy slap of canvas. Eliza turned. Snow had begun again, thick and damp. Through the trees, she could see one corner of the shingle shed cover sagging under a dark pocket of water and slush. The old marked bundles lay beneath it. Amos looked from the wagon to the shed. "I can follow Pike. You save the shingles." Eliza heard the offer for what it was. He could chase. He could command. He could become useful enough to avoid obedience. "No. Hester follows. You help me save the proof." His jaw tightened once. "All right." Hester mounted and slipped into the trees after the wagon. Eliza and Amos ran downhill. By the time they reached the shed, the canvas had dragged one support pole sideways and pulled the lower rope free. Water poured from the fold as Eliza lifted the edge. "Inside bundles first," she said. Amos seized the nearest stack, one at a time. "The old cords will break if you take two." He set one down without argument and carried the other beneath the inner roof. Eliza hauled the next bundle clear. The outer shingles were wet, but the 3-notch marks beneath the binding line remained dry. Amos braced the leaning pole while she cut fresh rope. Snow soaked his shoulders and gathered along his beard. He could have reminded her the wagon was getting farther away. He did not. They moved every marked bundle under cover, reset the support, and pitched the canvas steep enough to shed the weight. When the final knot held, Eliza's hands were stiff with cold. Amos stood beside the pole, breathing hard. "You could have caught them," she said. "Perhaps. You wanted to." "Yes, and you stayed. You told me which loss mattered more." The answer entered deeper than any apology had. Hester returned before dawn. The grey mule's flanks were dark with sweat, but she had kept him to a steady pace. Snow powdered her shoulders. "Lower enclosure behind the east freight shed," she said. Pike took the wagon through the rear gate. Silas Red opened it. Voller watched the load go under canvas. "Did they move anything toward the mine?" Eliza asked. "Not tonight." Hester pulled off one glove and flexed her fingers. "The mine buyer's wagon comes at 8 the morning after next. Voller told Silas every seasoned piece must be ready before then." Amos glanced toward the paling sky. "November 11th. Yes." Hester's face hardened. Voller also told him if anyone questioned the source, Silas would answer for every load. Did Silas reply? He said he had warned him about the green household wood. Voller said, "Warnings do not change who signs the yard wages." Eliza looked toward the road to Millstone. They had one full day. Enough to prepare witnesses. Not enough for mistakes. "Go home and rest the grey," she told Hester. After breakfast, warn Ruth and Mrs. Bell. Tell them to bring one green replacement round and any return piece they can identify. And the others, only those who can name their wood without guessing. Hester nodded and rode away. Dawn spread pale across the ridge. Amos remained beside the shingle shed, coat wet through, hands reddened from cold and rope. Eliza checked the old bundles once more. Every mark was intact. The wagon had carried away the billet, but not the proof that gave its mark a history. "You chose my judgment," she said. Amos rested one hand against the support pole. "I followed the work you named. Even when you believed another choice might recover the wood." "Yes, 20 years ago, you decided without asking me." His face tightened. "I did. Last night you asked." "Yes. And when I gave you an answer you disliked, you obeyed it." Amos did not step toward her. "Yes." Eliza closed the distance herself. She lifted one hand and placed it against his jaw. His skin was cold beneath the damp beard. A steady pulse moved near her thumb. He became still, not from fear, but from waiting. She had imagined kissing the young man who promised cedar before winter. That man no longer existed. Neither did the girl who waited for him. Eliza rose onto her toes and touched her mouth to Amos's. The kiss was gentle enough to end at once. He let her choose. She stayed. His hand lifted, paused near her waist, then settled there only when she leaned closer. He kissed her back, without taking more than she offered. Warmth moved through the cold between them, sharpened by grief, trust, and the knowledge that this moment belonged to no past promise. Eliza ended it first. Amos released her. "That was my choice," she said. "I know. It does not settle everything. No, good." She lowered her hand. "We have a day to prepare." By sunrise, they had begun. Eliza secured the marked shingles and wrote the names of households whose wood could be identified. Hester carried word after breakfast. Ruth Carlin and Mrs. Bell agreed to come. 3 other families sent descriptions of cuts, knots, and stove lengths. Amos dispatched a rider to a county deputy sheriff traveling near Millstone, asking only that he attend to prevent a breach of the peace. The deputy sent back one answer. He would come, but he would decide no ownership at a gate. Eliza arranged empty wagons for any wood Voller chose to return. She gave Amos 4 rules: no forced entry, no broken lock, no threat, no man speaking for her. He accepted all 4. Before dark on November 10, every witness knew to stand outside Voller's yard at 7:30 the next morning. At 8, the mine buyer would arrive for a load. Rufus Voller could no longer move in darkness. At 7:30 on the morning of November 11, Eliza stood outside Rufus Voller's freight yard with 6 households, 3 empty wagons, 1 deputy sheriff, and enough old wood to make a lie expensive. Frost silvered the road. Her hands were stiff from the previous night's work, and Hester's eyes were red from too little sleep. But every object they carried had a purpose. Ruth Carlin brought 1 green fir round from the load that had smoked her nieces from their cabin. Mrs. Bell held the black knot pine Eliza had returned to her. Hester had 2 pieces marked with her wider wedge spacing. The old shingle bundles rested on Eliza's converted sled, their weathered 3-notch cuts hidden beneath the cords until she chose to show them. Across the road, Amos waited beside the windfall teams. His men stood with him. No one touched Voller's gate. The county deputy sheriff, a square-built man named Caleb Vane, had arrived from the South Road before dawn. He kept his coat buttoned high and his hands free. "I am here to keep men from striking one another," he said before anyone approached the fence. "I will hear names and note what is said. I will not decide ownership in the road." Eliza nodded. "That is all I asked." Amos remained across the road. Voller came from the office when he saw the wagons. Silas Red followed more slowly, key ring at his belt. "This yard is closed," Voller called. "The mine buyer is due at 8, Eliza said. "Then you know better than to block my business." "We are not blocking the road." She gestured toward the open passage left for freight. "We are asking you to show the buyer what he is purchasing." Voller's eyes moved over Ruth's green fir, Mrs. Bell's marked pine, and the old bundles on the sled. "You have brought scraps and stories. I brought people who can name their own wood from outside my fence. Open it." "No." The deputy spoke before Amos could. "No one will force the gate. No one will climb it. If either side starts a fight, I will stop it." Voller gave him a cold look. "Then move them off my road." "It is the county road," Vane said. "They are standing clear of traffic." The answer gave Eliza room without giving her victory. She preferred it that way. At 3 minutes before 8, the sound of mule bells came from the lower grade. The mine wagon appeared between the buildings, high-sided and empty, 4 animals pulling beneath polished harness. The buyer rode beside the driver in a fur-collared coat. He slowed when he saw the gathering. "What is this?" he asked. Voller stepped into the road. "A private nuisance. Your load is ready." Eliza lifted Ruth's green fir round. Sap had dried in pale streaks along the bark. The seasoned wood behind that fence came from household stacks. Green wood was delivered in its place. The buyer looked at Voller. "Is the freight disputed?" "By a widow who marks every tree in the county after it is cut." "Not every tree," Eliza said. "Only the ones I own." She pointed to the old shingle bundles. "Those marks are 7 years old. Hester Lane can identify her lengths. Mrs. Bell can identify the black knot pine from the tree beside her spring house. Ruth Carlin Has the green replacement your load was meant to profit from? The buyer studied the group, then the deputy. Are you seizing the cargo? No, Vane said. I am keeping peace. Any complaint will be sworn before the proper county authority. Then I will inspect before I accept. Voller's face hardened. You contracted for dry fuel and clear title. You have my title. I have your word. The buyer glanced toward the fence. Open the gate and show me the load, or I take my team home. Voller turned to Silas. Open it. Silas did not move at once. Voller's voice sharpened. You heard me. The foreman drew the key from his belt. 2 workers lifted the crossbar. The gate opened under Voller's own order and their hands. Amos remained across the road. Eliza entered first, with Hester, the buyer, and Deputy Vane. The households followed in a narrow line. Voller stayed close enough to hear every identification. The lower enclosure held 3 covered rows. Eliza went to the nearest and pulled back the canvas. No one touches anything until the owner names it, she said. Voller laughed. You give commands easily on another man's ground. Then stop me with facts, Mrs. Bell identified her black knot pine by the broad black eye near the bark and a saw line that slanted because her nephew's blade had been dull. Hester identified 3 lengths from her north stack, each 2 inches longer than Eliza's stove wood, and carrying her wider wedge marks. Ruth found 2 cedar rounds she had bought before winter, and pointed to the shallow crescent cut her brother made when trimming bark. Eliza moved to the second row. Under the canvas lay the lightning-scarred billet. She did not touch it at first. This one was cut on my holding in 1879, she said. Ephraim Dunlow and I split it from a wind-felled cedar. The lightning seam runs from the top edge into the grain. His maul glanced here. She pointed to the bruised bark. I marked it with 3 cuts. It was taken before Amos Stafford returned the first wagon. I kept it beneath an overturned feed box beside my door. Last night, one of Voller's men entered my yard, lifted the box, and carried this piece to Warren Pike's wagon. Warren Pike stood near the rear shed. His face went pale beneath his beard. You saw him? Voller asked. I saw the billet in his arms, or Amos saw it. Hester followed the wagon by the south cut and watched it enter this enclosure. Hester spoke from behind her. Silas Red opened the rear gate. Voller stood under the east shed. Voller pointed at the billet. Marks can be copied. A scar proves only that cedar grew under lightning. Eliza turned the wood enough to show the crooked grain beneath the split. Copy the scar. Copy the bruise. Copy the twist that made Ephraim cut it shorter. Then explain why the dry ground beneath my feed box still held its shape after your man carried it away. The buyer crouched and examined the grain. He said nothing. Eliza untied one old shingle bundle and lifted the top row. 3 weathered notches appeared beneath the cord line. Then another set, then another. These were cut 7 years ago, she said, before Voller leased this yard, before he accused me of making the mark last week. Voller turned on Silas. You received every load. If anything questionable entered this yard, you answer for it. Silas stared at him. You told me the source was settled. I told you to keep records. You told me households would burn what they were given once the cold came. The yard went still. Voller stepped closer. Choose your next words wisely. Silas's hand closed over the key ring. I warned you the lower ridgewood was too green for stove loads. You said the mine paid cash and households could carry the balance. You ordered the seasoned stacks mixed under canvas. Last night, you told me I would answer if anyone asked where they came from. You are saving your wages? No. Silas removed the key ring and laid it on a barrel. I am done letting you save yours with my name." One worker set down a loading hook. Another stepped away from the mine wagon. Warren Pike looked at the ground. The buyer rose. "I contracted for dry fuel with no claim against it." Voller faced him. "You have heard one foreman frightened for his place. I have seen household marks, old marks, green replacements, and a load moved by night." The buyer turned to his driver. "Take the team back." Voller caught the wagon rail. "If you leave, the mine will lose its winter place. Better that than lose the cargo in a county dispute." The driver turned the mules. Bells moved away down the road. No one cheered. They watched Voller's premium contract leave empty. Deputy Vane opened a small notebook. "I will take names from those making claims and those who handled the loads. No judgment is being made here." Eliza faced Voller. "Return what can be identified today." "And if I refuse, then every household here swears a complaint in Quincy. The buyer gives his account. Silas gives his. Hester gives hers. Your own driver explains last night." Voller looked toward his workers. None had resumed loading. The yard still belonged to him. Their obedience no longer did. "Clearly identified pieces only," he said. "No guesses. Agreed." Eliza directed the work. Mrs. Bell's wood went first because her reserve was smallest. Ruth's load followed. Hester identified enough pine to fill half a wagon, then sent part of it to an older couple near the creek whose stove had gone cold before dawn. Amos did not enter the yard until Eliza crossed the road and spoke to him. She pressed his hand once, brief and firm. "Take Mrs. Bell's wagon." "Yes, nothing more." He climbed to the seat and moved only the load she assigned. By afternoon, marked stacks had begun returning to the households they belonged to. Deputy Vane recorded the lightning scar, 3 notches, crooked grain, and maul bruise in Eliza's presence. He did not take the billet. Eliza wrapped it in clean canvas and placed it on her sled. It remained hers, unburned, and available if the county later called for inspection. Voller had not been sentenced. No court had ruled, but he had lost the buyer, the trust of his workers, and the belief that household credit gave him the right to decide who stayed warm. Near dusk, the last restitution wagon left the yard. Amos stood beside the empty loading platform, while snow began to fall in dry, fine grains. "What do you want me to bring tomorrow?" he asked. Eliza looked at the opened gate, the canvas-wrapped billet on her sled, and the road leading toward homes that would burn clean wood that night. "Nothing," she said. Then she met his eyes. "Come anyway." 53 days after the freight yard gate opened, the lightning-scarred cedar billet still had not touched flame. Eliza kept it wrapped in clean canvas on 2 blocks inside the shingle shed, where damp could not reach it and no curious visitor could mistake it for common fuel. Deputy Caleb Vane had copied the 3 notches, the crooked grain, the lightning seam, and Ephraim's old maul bruise into his notebook before Eliza carried the billet home. Since then, 2 men from Quincy had come to view it, one for Voller and one for the households preparing complaints. Each had seen the same marks. Each had left without taking it. The wood remained hers. January 3, 1884, dawned white and brittle over the Plumas County ridges. Restitution had reached every household Eliza could identify with certainty. Mrs. Bell burned dry pine beneath her low chimney. Ruth Carlin no longer tied a cloth across her face before opening the stove. Hester's Gray and Bay worked together again, hauling fuel under her own name and no one else's account book. She had already paid Amos the first portion of what he had advanced to release Voller's claimed hold, using money from a charcoal order delivered before Christmas. Amos had accepted the payment without reducing it, forgiving it, or pretending it gave him any claim over the team. Rufus Voller still owned the freight yard, but the yard no longer owned Millstone's Winter. The mine buyer had not returned. Several cutters now took household work directly. Silas Redd had left Voller's employ and given his account before a county officer in Quincy. Voller disputed the household claims and called the marks uncertain, yet he had not managed to explain the green loads, the night wagon, or why his own foreman's warnings matched the condition of every smoking stove. No judgment had been issued. No official had declared the matter finished. Winter had simply made waiting impossible, and Eliza had built a way around him. By noon, Hester stopped her team outside Eliza's gate with 6 empty kindling sacks folded behind the wagon seat. "He is coming," she said. Eliza looked toward the lower bend. Amos walked beside his sorrel rather than riding. The horse carried a saddle, a blanket, and nothing else. "You knew?" Eliza asked. "He passed me near the creek." Hester gathered the reins. No axe, no flour, no bundle tied behind the saddle. The man has finally learned how to travel poor. Eliza almost smiled. Windfall is not poor. Tighter than he likes. Hester's humor faded. He sold 12 steers before the price improved. Let one hired man go. Works the west fence himself. He did not tell me. That is why I did. Hester clicked to the team, then stopped. He is not ruined. I did not ask. No, but you would wonder. She drove on before Eliza could answer. Amos reached the gate a few minutes later. Snow dusted the brim of his hat and the shoulders of his coat. He tied the sorrel beyond the fence rail and waited. Eliza opened the gate. "You brought nothing," she said. "I thought I had been clear about learning. The lesson may still be beyond you. Then I will repeat it." She stepped aside. "Come in." He removed his coat in the kitchen, but did not hang it until she pointed to the peg. The stove burned steadily. Beans simmered with onions in an iron pot, and a loaf rested beneath a cloth near the hearth. Amos took the chair across from her table. He had come several evenings, since November 11, always when invited. Sometimes they spoke of the complaints in Quincy, sometimes of cattle, shingles, oats, or whether the North Road would close under another storm. Once they sat through an entire cup of coffee without trying to settle the past. Each visit ended before habit could call the next one owed. Eliza ladled beans into 2 bowls. "Hester paid you." "Part of it. You took the full amount she offered. It was hers to decide. She says you sold cattle early." "I did, because of the returned mine advance, partly, and the lost hauling." "Yes." Amos broke bread and placed half beside her bowl before taking his own. "Windfall will hold. You do not need to make it sound easier than it is. I am not. It is tighter than I prefer, not desperate. Do you regret ending the contract?" "No. Even before you knew whether I would ask you back," Amos met her gaze. Even then, the answer did not sound romantic. It sounded settled. That was why Eliza trusted it. "Caleb Vane came yesterday," she said. "He wants the billet kept available until Voller's challenge is answered." "Did he ask to move it?" "No. He said my custody is sufficient if I bring it to Quincy when called." Amos nodded. He did not offer a wagon. Silas gave his statement 2 days before Christmas. Voller will say he spoke to save himself. He did speak to save himself. Eliza lifted her spoon. That does not make him wrong. Amos' mouth shifted at one corner. No, they ate until the first hunger passed. Outside, wind brushed dry snow against the window. Eliza had begun to recognize the difference between Amos preparing to speak and Amos preparing to work. His hands stayed still around the bowl. "What is it?" she asked. I need to tell you something without making it a bargain. Then do not ask a price. I won't. Amos set the bowl aside. I loved the girl who waited for me. Eliza's fingers tightened beneath the table. He continued before she could answer. I loved her hope. I loved that she believed I would come back better than I left. I failed her. The words did not flatter the past. They faced it. But she is not the woman sitting here. Eliza held his gaze. Amos's voice roughened. The woman sitting here built a life after grief. She worked beside a good man and did not make his years lesser because mine were unfinished. She knows when wood will burn, when a wagon is badly loaded, and when help comes with a hook inside it. She can stand in a freight yard and make men answer to what their own hands carried. He drew one breath. I love that woman. Eliza felt the sting of tears and refused to lower her face. Amos did not move toward her. I love you, Eliza. No softened phrase, no promise hidden inside metaphor. Her name and the truth. Not because you waited, he said. You stopped waiting long ago. Not because I brought back wood. You would have found another way without me. I love you because you know your own mind and still leave room for another person to speak. I love you because when I failed to ask 20 years ago, you did not let me hide behind regret now. Eliza rose from the table. Amos remained seated until she said, Stand. He did. She walked around the table, but stopped beyond his reach. I love you too. His eyes closed once. The relief in his face was so naked that she nearly crossed the distance at once. She did not. But I will not call those years a blessing just to ease either of us. I would not ask you to. My father's lie was not providence. No, your silence was not sacrifice. No, Ephraim's life was not a road leading me back to you. No, he was my husband. He was good to me. I will not reduce him so our ending looks cleaner. Amos's voice stayed steady. I would never ask that. And I will not pretend loving you now makes what happened right. It doesn't. The answer steadied her more than apology could. Eliza took one step closer. What do you want? Amos did not say her. Courtship, if you will have it. Openly? Yes. Millstone will discuss what does not concern it. Millstone survives on that. Separate homes through. Winter. Yes, no arriving because you assume an evening belongs to you. I will wait for an invitation. No moving my work to Windfall because the road is easier for you. Agreed. No moving. Your cattle here because you wish to be near me. They would eat your shingle stock. They would not live long enough to regret it. A brief warmth entered his expression. Eliza let it. In spring, she said, we decide whether marriage fits the lives we have now, not the lives we imagined at 24. Yes, my holding remains mine. Yes, Windfall remains yours. Yes, do not answer too fast. You may discover marriage asks things neither of us has considered. Then we will consider them before we answer. She crossed the final space and placed one hand against his chest. His heartbeat moved beneath her palm. Strong, uneven, present. Amos did not touch her. Eliza lifted her face and kissed him. The first kiss beside the shingle shed had been brief, sharpened by cold and evidence, and the choice he had obeyed. This one carried no danger. No wagon waited in darkness. No household needed saving. Eliza let it deepen. Amos answered with a restraint that did not diminish desire. His hand rose toward her waist, then stopped before contact. He drew back only enough to speak. May I hold you? The man who had once crossed mountains and failed at the final 20 yards now waited for one word. Eliza touched his cheek. Yes, his arms came around her, firm, measured. No ownership in the strength of them. She leaned against him and felt no debt form, no door close, no part of her life grow smaller. When she kissed him again, she was the one who drew him nearer. Later, dusk gathered blue at the windows. Amos put on his coat and followed her to the gate. The sorrel lifted its head at his approach. "I will give you my answer about spring after winter," Eliza said. "I understand, on one condition. Name it." She glanced toward the woodshed, more orderly than full. "Next winter, don't wait for me to run out of wood." Amos's face warmed. "I will come before the first hard frost. Ask before you unload, always." Eliza opened the gate. He stepped through, then turned only when she said his name. She crossed the space and kissed him beneath the bare branches while snow began to fall in fine, dry grains. "Go tend your cattle," she said. "Yes, ma'am." Amos led the sorrel toward Windfall Ranch. Eliza remained at her own gate before her own house, loved without being diminished, waiting now only for the things she had freely chosen. By the following autumn, Millstone had learned to prepare for winter before fear could set the price. Hester Lane drove 2 teams now, the Gray and Bay in the lead wagon and a younger pair behind. Her name stood at the top of every hauling agreement, and no merchant's ledger held her harness as security. Ruth Carlin kept the household fuel list in a school copybook, reading each order aloud before she marked it. Mrs. Bell counted kindling bundles beneath Eliza's shed roof and rejected any tied with loose twine. "A knot that slips in October becomes cold fingers in January," she said, and no one argued. Rufus Voller no longer controlled the freight yard. The county matter had taken months, not one dramatic morning. Witnesses traveled to Quincy. Statements were copied. Voller contested marks, quantities, and every debt that might have been turned against him. In the end, the clearly identified household credits were struck from his claims. Further restitution was assessed, and he sold his remaining interest in the yard to meet part of what he owed. The new operator kept mine freight separate from household orders and posted prices where anyone could read them. Some families recovered only part of what they had lost. Silas Redd found work with a timber crew south of Quincy. Justice arrived unevenly, counted in cords, wages, and winter accounts. It was still justice. Eliza's holding remained hers. She cut shingles, marked fuel, chose deadfall, and refused trees that would leave the next year poorer. The wood circle had become a seasonal arrangement rather than an emergency. Coin paid some orders. Labor paid others. No one bought warmth with obedience. Windfall Ranch remained Amos's. The winter after he abandoned Voller's freight had run lean. He sold cattle sooner than he wished, repaired his own fence lines, and hired fewer hands. By spring, the ranch had steadied. Not rich, never secretly rich. Sound enough to carry its own weight. Eliza and Amos had carried theirs as well. Their courtship was built from ordinary crossings of the 1.5 miles between their homes. Suppers by invitation. Sunday walks when weather and work allowed. Mornings planned rather than assumed. They disagreed about team routes, roof pitch, and whether Amos's west pasture could spare another load of deadfall. They learned to speak before silence made a decision for them. In May, after the last snow left the north slope, they agreed to marry in the spring of 1885. No hurried ceremony, no merging of land. Eliza's holding would remain recorded in her name. Windfall would remain in his. Until then, they kept separate homes because choice meant more when no crisis forced the distance closed. Late October 1884 brought hard blue mornings and frost along the north side of Eliza's woodpile. Her shed stood more than half full. Cedar occupied the west wall, pine the east, kindling stacked high beneath the driest beam. She had planned well, she always did. The lightning-scarred billet rested inside the shingle shed on 2 blocks beneath the window. 3 weeks earlier, the final county paper had released it from further examination. Eliza had removed the canvas, brushed away the dust, and left the wood where light could reach the black seam. For nearly a year, it had served as proof. She had not decided what should come after proof. That morning, wagon wheels sounded on the lower road before the sun cleared the ridge. Eliza stood beside the shed with a bundle of roof shakes under one arm and listened to the steady pull of a loaded team. No haste, no hidden canvas. When the wagon appeared between the pines, Amos sat on the seat in his brown work coat, seasoned cedar and pine stacked behind him in clean rows. He stopped outside the gate. He always did. Eliza set down the shingles and walked toward him. "You know my woodshed is not empty." "I noticed. You know I did not send word that I was freezing. I had hoped the full use of my judgment would not be required." She opened the gate. "Bring the wagon in." Amos clicked to the team and guided them through. He stopped where she pointed, set the brake, and climbed down. "Where do you want the load?" "Nowhere until I inspect it." "I expected that." Eliza lifted the first cedar split, dry, clean grain, good weight. No household mark belonging to another cutter. She checked 3 more, then a pine round with tight bark and a straight saw line. "Windfall, deadfall, west fence. 2 trees lost in the spring wind. Who cut it?" "I cut the cedar. The Marsh brothers cut the pine." "Hester inspect it?" "Yesterday." Eliza turned a crooked piece in her hands. "You brought witnesses against yourself." "Experience has improved me, a little." His smile came slow. "I will take what I can get." Eliza carried the crooked piece to the shed, then returned without another split. She went instead to the shingle shed and lifted the lightning-scarred billet from its blocks. Amos's expression changed when he saw it. Not surprise, recognition. The county released it. 3 weeks ago, and you kept it whole. Until today, she set it upright on the chopping block. The narrow black seam ran through the bark. 3 old notches remained visible on the end. Ephraim's glancing maul mark bruised one side. The billet held more than one life now. Work beside Ephraim. Theft by Voller. Amos returning the first wagon. The night it was taken again. Witnesses at the yard. Months beneath canvas while strangers copied what Eliza had known by touch. "I thought of keeping it," she said. "You may. On the mantel, perhaps." So people could point at it and ask for the story. Amos rested one hand on the wagon rail. "Do you want that?" "No." "What do you want?" Eliza ran her palm over the cedar. "Heat." She picked up the splitting wedge and set it along the lightning seam. Then she held the maul toward him, but kept her hand on the handle. Together. Amos placed his hand below hers. He waited until she released the tool. They stood the billet straight. The grain twisted beneath the scar, but the old seam offered a natural line. Eliza steadied the wedge. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." The first strike drove iron into cedar. The second opened a narrow crack. On the third, the billet split lengthwise with a sharp report. One half fell toward Eliza. The other landed near Amos's boot. Each piece carried part of the black seam and part of the 3-notch mark. Amos bent for the nearer half. "Which is mine?" Eliza examined the grain. "That one." "Why?" "The twist will make it burn slower, so you are still improving windfall. I am correcting your fuel." He lifted the piece. "Of course." Eliza carried her half to the woodshed and placed it beside the stove wood, separate from the new load. Amos stopped at the threshold. "This half burns tonight," she said. "Mine too. You do not have to match me." "I know. Good." She pointed toward the wagon. "Cedar first, west wall," they unloaded together. Amos carried what she named. Eliza set the rose and rejected one split with hidden softness near the heart. Their shoulders brushed once between wagon and shed. Neither apologized. By noon, the load stood under cover. The horses had been watered, and cedar dust lay pale across the yard. Amos lifted the empty wagon bed to check the boards. I may have brought more than you needed. You brought what we agreed before summer. I remembered. That is becoming useful. He came to stand near her, leaving enough room that nearness remained an invitation rather than a claim. Eliza looked at the filled woodshed, the clean frost beneath the fence, and the road he had taken before. Need made it urgent. A year earlier, he had arrived with stolen wood and 20 years of absence behind him. Today, he had come on time, under terms they had chosen together. This time, you're early, she said. Amos's face softened. I said I would be. You said many things when you were young. I am trying to improve the record. Eliza caught the front of his coat and drew him down. She kissed him in the open yard, with no danger requiring courage and no witnesses requiring proof. Amos rested one hand at her waist and returned the kiss without hurry. When she stepped back, he let her go. Come for supper, she said, empty-handed. Bring your half of the cedar. I want to know whether it burns slower. That sounds like work. Come anyway. At dusk, Eliza placed her half of the lightning-marked cedar in her stove. A mile and a half away, Amos laid the other half on the fire at Windfall Ranch. 2 separate chimneys sent smoke into the cold evening. The plumes rose above 2 homes, bent beneath the same west wind, and met over the first thin snow before either one disappeared.